Sources of history. In this chapter, we get information about the sources of Indian history. We can study material sources, written sources, oral sources, the sources of ancient Indian history, and the precautions to be taken while writing history. We get information about history through a number of objects used by our ancestors, the inscriptions they had made, customs and traditions, folk arts, folk literature, as well as historical documents. These sources help us to understand our history. All these are known as sources of history. The sources of history are of three types: material sources, written sources, and oral sources. Material sources. Human beings use a variety of things in their day-to-day lives. They are known as artifacts, which provide us valuable information about life in the ancient times. We can decide the period of ancient artifacts like earthen pots by studying the shape, color, and designs on ancient potsherds. We get information about the diet of the people from the remains of food grains, seeds, and bones of animals. All such artifacts, articles, monuments, or their ruins are called material sources of history. In the ancient times, people used to roast food grain before grinding them. Few charred grains can remain intact for a very long period. When these grains are inspected in a laboratory, we come to know what grain it is. Written sources. The Stone Age people have recorded many events and expressed their emotions in paintings on rocks. In the beginning, human beings wrote on potsherds, unbaked bricks, using pointed objects, and birch trees. Many rulers had their orders, judicial decisions, donations, etc. inscribed on stone or copper plates. Human beings had begun to record the events that took place around them, also the accounts of the proceedings of the royal court. Many forms of literature, such as books on religious and social subjects, plays, poetry, travelogues, and scientific works, help us to understand the history of various historical periods. These sources are known as the written sources of history. Oral sources. Ovies, folk songs, folk tales, and similar literature is passed on from generation to generation by word of mouth. This type of literature, preserved by oral tradition, forms the oral sources of history.